You have full right to be looking at me on my bike and questioning, what do I know about the perfect triathlon setup? Well, I have two responses. Firstly, Optimum isn't about looking good. It's about combining your power, your comfort, and aerodynamics and considering them all together. And secondly, I've brought Mark along, who's going to be translating some of what bike fitter Brian is looking at on my setup and giving you takeaways that you can use for your own TT setup at home.
I think people think that a bike fit is only for pros and therefore they want to look pro, but really what we want to do is provide comfort, sustainability and enjoyment riding your bike so that you can get your best performance.
Hopefully from Heather going through a bike fit and just these little snippets as she's trying to prepare and get her bike fit perfected for 70.3 Worlds, you guys might learn something and maybe it'll allow you to go away and figure out what you need to do to perfect your own TT bike setup. We're 20 minutes in, haven't even touched the bike. So what's the plan? What are you going through here? You're trying to assess?
I think the important thing is to understand the rider and a little bit more about their capacity, their strength, their mobility. It just helps us to understand a little bit more about what we want to do on the bike, where we can find little advantages, where we can find little wins, and it just gives us a little bit more context. When we get Heather on the bike, we can then understand a little bit more about what we're seeing, and then again, where we can transfer that knowledge into improving her position on the bike as well.
And for someone back home, what can they take from this where they can assess on themselves before perhaps trying to get themselves into a certain fit or a position on the bike? Is there anything they can sort of figure out from their own mobility?
Yeah, I think some of the key things we've gone through ahead of this morning, so like a forward bend, we'll look at your overall lumbar and forward flexibility. A hip hinge, which is that forward straight back position, we'll look at kind of what capacity you have to your hamstrings and measuring your hamstring flexibility. Then looking at your hip clearance, so that knee hug into the chest to see what sort of range of motion you've got at your hip. Is there anything like a hip impingement that might be limiting your range in there? Those sort of factors give us a really good idea as to where we think the rider's pelvis might be able to rotate to and sort of just how long or how low, what might be a suitable front end. And then the other things like looking at core strength is just looking at positional sustainability. Are there opportunities to train that, to improve that? Or do we need to give the rider a more supported position to make it easier to maintain that position for their event?
Just a quick one then about saddle discomfort, or at least sort of pain in that area. How often is it the saddle that's causing the issue, or in fact just the position of your setup or the saddle setup?
Yeah, I mean, both factors interplay with one another. More often than not, in my experience, the saddle height and position is the bigger problem that you need to sort of tick off and complete and set first. Once you've got that sorted and you've got a saddle position that allows the rider to be stable and extending their leg comfortably through the pedal stroke, then it's about making sure that the contact points that the saddle provides, shape, cushioning, padding, is then sorted out after that.
I mean, it's easier said than done, isn't it? I mean, there's so many saddle options out there. How do you go about choosing the right one? What's the kind of like the first port of call there?
Once you feel happy with that your position is good, then there are actually quite a few saddle brands that do demo programs and testing programs or loaning programs. So check with your local bike shops or with the manufacturers to see if you can actually do some test saddles, because the best way is to ride them and test them. Of course, if you've got access to a good bike fitter who's got a range of seats, then you'll be able to go through and test multiple seats back to back. And that's really the best way to be able to decide what's going to work best for you.
Okay, so we've got Heather onto the bike now. She's just getting herself warmed up. Really interested to see kind of the running order of things that Brian's going to go through here. So first off, he's got the optimised pressure mapping device on. So we're going to see essentially where Heather is sat on that saddle. And then from there, we can start to look at things like cleat position, but then also the front end. So one of the things Heather is really keen to do is just get herself lower, but of course, making sure she's stable and that's sustainable. So let's see what happens.
So what we've just done there is we've just gone through our baseline to give you a chance to get into warmed up position on the bike, have a little look from all different sides to see how your body's interacting with the bike. We've run some video, we've run a little bit of pressure mapping. Now we can go through that together and have a little look and see what we might consider changing to improve things a little bit.
So you've just sorted out Heather's cleats, done a bit of pressure mapping, cleat adjustment. What are we going to do now then? What's the next step?
Yeah, so having done our baseline observations, the key thing was just to check over Heather's cleat position, because that will have a big influence on foot posture, and foot posture will have a big influence on how the leg extends, and so saddle height and things like that. So cleat position was looking pretty good. We just made a slight adjustment on the stance width for Heather, so we brought that in just a little bit narrower. We want to make sure that she's getting a really good effective contact across her whole forefoot. And again, we talked about wanting to make sure the cleats are rearward so that we're not over fatiguing the calves, which is obviously going to be helpful for them getting into the run. So in a triathlon context, when we don't need to be able to sprint and put out high power and peak power moments, and we know we need to run after the bike, we want the cleats as far back as possible.
She sits quite far forwards on her saddle, right? So she's opted for kind of like the ergon sort of front saddle.
Yeah.
What does that mean then when we come onto the front end? What are we looking at?
Well, what's interesting is that seeing where Heather interacts at the seat matches up quite a bit with what we saw when we did our screening. So looking at her hamstring flexibility and her pelvic rotation flexibility. But with the front end, we hope that Heather's got some capacity to either work on lengthening or lowering that front. Those are the options that we can consider to change that frontal area. And we're going to see where we can get the best stability and comfort from while getting a sort of a slightly more optimized position. Just bring your hands one on top of the other. That's it. Yeah, so you see, like, this is where like the pads are so short at the moment.
Yeah.
I think they're probably tucking you in a bit again, so we can kind of test how changing that feels. So what did you feel when we put you into that position?
Like, I can do it, but straight away I feel like it's making me work. Like, I feel like I couldn't do it for 3 hours.
Yeah, so this is a really nice demonstration of a position that is really effective from an aerodynamics and wind tunnel perspective. But if we don't train in that capacity to that really good range of motion you have, there's no point in us setting you up like this. So if we've got a good time scale to build up that strength and to build up that positional tolerance, that's excellent. But if we're on a shorter time scale, we need to consider what's actually viable with your riding position.
2 months? Why is that it? That's a lot in my
Aim
mind.
high, aim high. Yeah, exactly. So what we'll do, let's just have you, I want you to ride into that position because I want to kind of almost set a bit of a template, okay? Because if we can actually get you to train in that position, and then what I'd like you to do is to draw your shoulders towards me a little bit, bring your elbows towards me a little bit, bring your hands up over together, just overlap and rest them. That's it there. Okay, I just want to do this from a pure point of just showing where I think we can get to for a really effective position, because I think that's just worthwhile seeing and feeling. I want you to feel where the challenges are, but if you can stay dropped into that position for me, just hold that, because the more you can see what's hard and easy about that, the more we can figure out what to work on. All right, great.
Okay, so they've made a fair few changes, but at the same time, trying to not do anything too drastic, because actually Heather's got less than 2 months until her big race. Interestingly, she says she actually doesn't feel that different in the position, but does feel a little bit more sustainable. It's not like a drastic change. So she is a little bit more lengthened now. It also changed the angle of her saddle, so brought it up by about 2 degrees. She had a bit of a kind of forward tilt at the front of the nose. And we're now actually going to pop over onto this rig beside us here, because we're actually going to adjust a little bit more on the front end and maybe try and get a bit lower. So rather than pulling her front end apart on her own bike, we're just going to do it on here a little bit more simply.
So what we've just tested there, Heather, is front end height changes, but we've actually done about 9 different height changes there so that we can give you a really good simulation of where the changes come in your posture, where the changes come in your postural load, and where the changes come in comfort as well and sustainability. So this is where the jig comes in handy, because it just allows us to test up, down, up, down, up, down, 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 for you to feel that difference. And we can also do it while you're riding, so you can live and dynamically feel things changing.
Okay, one very important factor, crank length. Now, it's a very kind of popular topic within bike fitting, particularly for triathlon. You've actually already reduced Heather's crank length on a previous bike fit down to 160. We're gonna have a little bit of play around now with different lengths for her and saddle heights. What's the reasoning behind potentially dropping to a shorter crank length? What are the benefits you see from it?
Well, there's a couple of reasons, and from our perspective, from a bike fit point of view, we're thinking about things from a biomechanics and physiology point of view. So really shortening the crank will reduce how big the pedaling circle is, which most obviously will free up the hip angle at the top of the pedal stroke. So that's the most obvious change. But it does change in a few other areas. So the front of the pedal stroke as well will also change the stability you have across the bike. So if you go too short, a rider can sometimes feel like they're tumbling over the front of the bike because the crank arm isn't in front to provide support. So that's something you have to consider when you do change crank length. You need to adjust the saddle height and the fore-aft position as well to maintain.
So what, you typically go higher then with the saddle as the crank length shortens?
As it shortens, we'll go higher to adjust, so long as we've got good pedaling action and control through the bottom of the pedal stroke. So you can gain sort of twice from the crank being shorter at the top. You'll also raise the seat and increase space as well at the top.
Well, I think the underlying theme here is obviously I need to spend more time in my position so that it becomes more comfortable, but also I've now worked out those areas that need some work, which hopefully you guys can go and find out your own specific bits. But it isn't just the contact points, it's also those bits in between that can cause you discomfort, like your neck and your back, which might need some strengthening. Brian has given me some exercises to go away and work on, which I need to try and fit into my training. But if you have absolutely nailed your strength and nailed your flexibility, then it might be time to start to look at your position a little bit more.
I mean, I've got to say, I'm quite excited seeing your progression today. You're looking really good. We've actually managed to get you down a little bit lower on the front by 20 mil.
Yeah, that feels okay.
It was really cool to see Brian working through that. They're almost like magicians, aren't they?
I know, it's
bike
cool.
fitters.
Well, I'll tell you later.
Well, yeah, hopefully you guys have gained a lot from just watching Heather go through that today, and maybe taken away something that maybe you can figure out and work on at home. But I think, for the most part, if it was I'd be heading into a bike fitter just to get them to do the work for me. Main thing, if you are doing any adjustments to your bike, take photos. I've definitely fallen foul of this before.
You get carried away.
You make a ton of adjustments, and what was I set up like
and
before?
now it all feels wrong.
So yeah, that's a very important point. Well, I hope you've enjoyed following along Heather's journey today in a bike fit. It's just a handful of weeks now until the World Champs, so
better get going.
better get practicing in that position. If you enjoyed today's video, give it a thumbs up, give it a like. See you next time.